the director of the central think tank, Mr. Torrin Wilkins. I propose, with your permission, that Torrin, you go first, and then we'll move on to Nicola and to Rachel. If that's okay by you, Torrin, over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Jamie. So at the moment, the biggest issue with people who've been denied furlough is essentially that in order to get onto the furlough system, they are essentially reliant on their employer to furlough them. So at the moment, what you've had is that if you are self-employed and you're able to get on the system, you apply yourself to the Treasury, and that is up to them to then process your application. With employees, they have to go through one extra step, and that is their employer. Now, there are two main categories of people that have been excluded in this group: some whose employer wasn't able to keep them on, wasn't able to afford to keep them on, and others who were laid off. And we've had a lot of people who were laid off, be it for health and safety reasons, where they called out concerns within their companies. So there are lots of different categories within this one denied furlough group. And it has genuinely been quite difficult, actually, to look at the number of people who weren't just refused furlough, but were also then subsequently denied universal credit. So I've had so many people, when I was researching this, message me or, drop me an email and essentially say that they were struggling to put food on the table because they weren't even able to get the basic, government support after being denied from the furlough scheme. We estimated it was about 800,000 people who had been at maximum denied from this scheme. So it has been incredibly difficult to watch. And we've actually produced two solutions so far. The first one was in our paper on excluded to included, which I did with my co-author, Janie Little. We essentially looked at lots of groups, whether they were self-employed or whether they were employed. And one of those solutions was on people who were employed but were denied furlough. We then took that over, we expanded that plan into what has become the expanding furlough paper, which I wrote, and essentially looks at a new solution for people who have been refused from the furlough system. So the basic solution is an entrance route into the job retention scheme for people who have been denied furlough by their employer. So essentially what this uses is a national insurance number to check PAYE data, pay-as-you-earn data, through real-time information submissions. So what it essentially does is means that the government can check how much tax someone has paid, when they've paid it, how much money they're earning, and when they've left payroll. So it gives the government a lot of the information they need in order to actually come up with an estimate for individuals who've been denied furlough. So there is two parts to the scheme we've created. The first is backdated. So essentially we've looked from the beginning of the furlough scheme all the way to November, which is when the statistics we used in our paper came out in terms of people who were on payroll and off payroll. And essentially it would be a backdated grant to cover from when they left the payroll up until our figures go up to November. Of course, the government could be more generous on that if they wanted to. And the other, which is probably less likely to be used given the roadmap out of lockdown, is future payments for employees, which would essentially be a straightforward access scheme using national insurance in much the same way that self-employed people can access the self-employed side of things. It would allow employees to access if they were refused furlough by their employer and get straight onto the system. But as I said, that is the less likely of the two to be used, just simply because of the roadmap out of lockdown. It would most likely be one large backdated payment now. And so this plan would essentially include people who were refused furlough and also new starters who are on payroll. So it would include large numbers of people. And we did actually receive a Treasury response to this. It was fairly neutral. It essentially said that they'd done a fairly good job on the scheme so far, which in some ways I have to agree with. I mean, we looked in there at the German and French systems, which have been around for decades. The Treasury really had months to get this into practice, whereas other countries have had decades. So to be fair on their side, they essentially did push a scheme into practice very quickly. I think what we're asking for is a more worker-centric approach in terms of our paper and our solutions, is one that takes into account more that employees have been refused. So essentially, at the moment, we're looking at a new version of this plan to tailor it more to individuals. But we have essentially gone through, and the basic idea, I think, for a solution for these people is there.
Jamie, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was just saying thank you very much. Thank you for the time reminder. I was muted.